Hello, welcome back to Umbraco Community Day, and we're going to dive in straight away with our next talk. We have Richard Jackson, who's going to be talking about Umbracademia. Hey, Richard.
Hey!
Hello, how's it going?
Good. How are you doing?
I'm good. I'm very confused about what camera I'm meant to be staring at, but there we go. It's all
Yeah,
good.
so
How's
are
your
we,
day
to
been
be
so far?
honest. There's a lot of cameras, a lot of screens. We counted. There's actually 15 screens responsible just for making the stream alone work. I'll put a picture on Twitter for anyone interested. It's yeah.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
Please.
We had a little chat about you earlier, Richard, because your 24 Days article kind of mentioned the fact that the journey, at least partly with the Umbraco community, kicked off 11-ish months ago when we did the first edition of Umbraco Community Day. You participated, you embraced it with, yeah.
Yeah,
How's the
absolutely.
past year been for you?
Oh, it's been great. It's been really fascinating. Yeah, and obviously it is entirely, well, largely your fault. So congratulations and thank you ever so much for bestowing one of the most interesting parts of 2023 upon me, and I'm grateful for that.
That's exciting.
Yeah.
I think the thing I always love about this story here is that you don't do Umbraco necessarily as your day job. I mean, we'll hear a little bit about how that might have been,
Yeah, for
those
sure.
boundaries might have blurred, but you're doing it for fun because you love the community and you like the product.
Yeah, and it's really funny how, especially within a startup world, you kind of have quite a lot of, I want to say voice, you've got a lot of sort of like, this is a thing that I think it would be worth us checking out. And so I'll be talking quite a bit about the company in terms of the dissertation project and potential future project as well. But yeah, really interesting stuff.
Exciting. Well, Richard, whenever you're ready, off you go.
The stage is yours.
Thank you ever so much. All right, let me just share. I believe. Are we just showing this way? Okay. 2 seconds, just going to sort this out. Okay, are we good to go?
Yeah,
hey, fantastic. Thank you so much. Hi, my name's Rich. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for the invitation. So this is Umbracademia. This is a talk about my dissertation, which I wrote for my computing masters, and it's an Umbraco 10 project. In the center, we see an email, which is the confirmation that I did submit this dissertation, but I currently have no idea what the result is. So this is very much about the journey and not so much about the destination. So I'm going to be going through sort of 5 sections here. We've got ourselves a background, the problem, the solution, the learning, and the reflection. So the background, me, hi. So I'm a Cardiff-based musician and developer. I'm a cloud software engineer at Nightingale HQ, and I recently submitted my master's computing dissertation. It was 2 months yesterday, I believe, is the exact anniversary. So to give a kind of rough timeline of things, in 2021, I left my career as a professional musician to retrain in computer science at Cardiff University. In 2022, as part of that course, I then actually retrained and then did this placement. And within that placement, that was the first sort of experience I'd had with .NET and Azure, .NET specifically outside of kind of a Unity sort of background. I think yeah, it's funny to me. I feel quite a lot of .NET developers may well have their starting point in Unity, but so be it. And then in 2023, as Callum has just been talking about, it was the introduction to Umbraco. Alongside that, I finished the placement with Nightingale, and then I started the dissertation for the project, which I did for Nightingale, and now I work full-time there. I had the privilege very recently of writing an article about the past year, and so shout outs to Scrift, shout outs to the 24 Days in Umbraco project in general, but that should give you a little more context if you are interested in what this year has been. So quickly, Nightingale HQ, or NHQ as they're going to be called throughout this, Cardiff, Ireland-based startup where there are 3 of us, digitalization services for the manufacturing sector, and we focus on .NET development. We are a .NET house. That is the thing that we do. Just to give context, the other 2 members of staff are Ruth, our CEO, and Chris, our CTO, who are both wonderful people, and I'm very, very grateful for their endless support on the general hijinks that I tend to be involved with. So the problem, Nightingale HQ would like a new website. So the current website, which is still online, is www.nightingalehq.af. It hosts news, blogs, contact details, fairly standard stuff, and as I said, is still currently online. So the Umbraco project, which I have done, is not the site which is currently live, just for reference. The current site is a static site generated site from using a combination of Hugo and Netlify CMS. So Hugo being written in Go and Netlify CMS being a headless CMS, which is written in JavaScript. Here's a quick infrastructure diagram of how static sites would work in this sort of context. So, you know, the author writes the content within Netlify CMS, which creates a markdown file. There's a GitHub action which combines that with Hugo and renders the actual front matter, the web pages, etc. And then that is hosted onto a CDN via a GitHub action, which is all fine. But we've got a couple of problems here. First of all, for Hugo, that's the only part of our tech stack which uses Go templates. You know, that's of all of the work, that's our website is the only place which uses Go in any sort of capacity. For Netlify CMS, we have not had the greatest editor experience in general. We'll be showing a little bit the behind the scenes of how we have been going about making blog articles, but it leaves something to be desired. And ultimately, this entire stack was created by staff who no longer are with the company, you know, and that's kind of a biggish deal. So possible solutions, we could just learn Go, and that's completely reasonable. It's a thing, but also as a startup, while, you know, dynamism and agility are very important, we also only have a limited, you know, number of man hours. So it just might be for having to learn a particular templating for one particular project for our particular site is less than ideal. We could look into actually customizing Netlify a touch more. Absolutely possible. It's just an area that we haven't particularly pursued. I'm also, as a sort of aside, interested in how we could have combined Umbraco 12 in the sort of headless capacity with the sort of static site generation of Hugo. That's actually kind of something I'm quite interested in for future projects. And then we could also basically just try and do a better job of trying to document how the site had been made before and try to understand all of the intricacies of it, especially down to the GitHub actions. We would often run into sort of strange deployment issues, which we didn't really have visibility on what caused them. So what we decided to do is, well, what I decided to do was set this all on fire and to say like, hey, we should try something completely different. And so instead of using Go templates, let's try using Razor templates. And instead of using this editor experience, why don't we make an entirely new one? And why don't we just make a new site where we make sure that we've got documentation on all of the processes? And so we've just got a touch more visibility on every step. And that takes us to our good friend, the big U itself, Umbraco. So that leads to my dissertation title of Migration of Nightingale HQ's website from Hugo to Umbraco CMS version 10, and that is what we're going to be talking about. So the solution. Here is the project structure breakdown, which I put together. It was quite interesting working on this project because I sort of was my own project manager and did quite a bit of research around stuff. So you'll see some interesting takes on like very useful project management techniques, which I was just kind of trying out for the first time. Anyway, the kind of steps would be to document the current site, to understand the current website, to create a front-end replica of the current site. This actually got removed, that got taken out of scope, but we'll talk about why very shortly. Build all the models which were required for what was going to be on this new site. Migrate the database, develop the CI/CD, architect the cloud infrastructure, and create all the extra web matter, you know, like sitemaps and robots, etc. The front end got removed. It was initially in scope, but the company decided, hey, well, we kind of want to do a front end redesign anyway, so why don't we tie this in? And so that just meant that I just sort of ignored that because it was something we were going to change anyway. The aesthetics of the actual finished site are largely built around the Clean package, Paul Seal's wonderful implementation of Clean. And yeah, so that's kind of where we left it. Hello. Here's the use case diagram. Yep, so very simple, just the fact that for our current site, we have a customer who can read, look for things, and then want to contact us, you know, and this is a fairly standard sitemap for our kind of usage, and this is what we ended up sort of like, when I was developing it, would kind of refer to make sure that everything was all as we expected it to be. Here is a quite dry table going from left to right of what we currently have and what we were looking to move to. So for example, the framework going from Hugo to ASP, templating from Go to Razor. My favorite is the database, going from no database, just a bunch of markdown files into SQL. and then going from static to dynamic using Netlify, and one of the other things is that we typically as a company prefer to use Azure DevOps rather than GitHub, and so we just moved everything over to there. But all the actual infrastructure itself was going to be Azure hosted. So here's the project timeline. So the project itself was meant to be 12 weeks. I had an extension for personal reasons, so that's why we've gone to 13. And this is kind of how I split up my sprints. I think my personal favorite, of course, is sprint 3, of which the task for sprint 3 is to learn Umbraco. So yeah, so that's a lovely little 2-week goal there. But a lot of this project was largely around meaning that I would have a reason to properly be a hands-on Umbraco developer for a while. As sort of was alluded to earlier, it's not necessarily the thing that I do in my day job, and so it'd be nice to actually, have a project, which this entire dissertation is. While I didn't try and replicate the front end styling, I did kind of pay like slight heedance to the geography of the pages. So on the left, you've got the current site, and then on the right, we have the site that I created. Yeah, just for awareness of visibility of that, I still try to kind of keep images, or at least have the flexibility to put images where they would need to be. Infrastructure-wise, I just made sure I used the most basic possible cloud infrastructure I could do, of having, a database, a storage account, and the app itself. I did have a local database and a production database. Comically, I did use the same Azure storage for both local and for production, which made me smile. And the only time that was ever a problem was at Code Cabin when the internet went down, and I then had to go back to a very local situation for like half an hour. But otherwise, this was fine for the sort of single project that I was dealing with. CI/CD pipeline, this is very much a large topic, which I'm not going to go into a huge amount of detail, but I ran into a number of issues. It's why I did it first in project, because I knew it'd be such an issue. And this is something that this is a post on the Umbraco forum, which I just kept updating with the various problems and solutions I was having. I was so grateful to a number of people on Twitter/X about helping out with that, because I ran into a lot of issues, and we gradually, kicking and screaming, found a way that we could click a button and then stuff gets deployed. And this is what that pipeline ended up looking like. So very simple, just kind of build, publish, deploy. And this was then split over the pipeline and the release pipeline in Azure DevOps, which again was nice to kind of architect my own version of, having not really done that before. So in terms of document types for this project, very basic. It's very much largely around detail, list, and just sort of generic kind of pages which are there. One of the really nice bits of research around this project in general was the sort of how you approach putting these sites together. So, I mean, it was great to find the Mark Goodson, Lee Callagher Code Garden talk on atomic design, and to kind of go, oh, great, okay, let's try and approach it from that kind of way. So very much trying to think of, how we're going to approach this from a composition kind of perspective, of which I'm very grateful. So packages used, nice little hall of fame here for the top 8. Well, the 8 that I used. So we've got contentment, ViewSync, Clean, Accessibility Reporter. I absolutely love Accessibility Reporter. Shout out to Matt for this. God Mode, Skybroad Redirects, I did EQD, and the SEO Toolkit. Again, SEO Toolkit, late addition to my roster, but my gosh, the stuff that I could do with it, which was a dream. Anyway, these packages are all wonderful, and if you haven't heard of any of them, please do check them out. And if you have heard of them, make sure you thank the people who made them, because they're great. Thank you. Data migration tool. This was basically the largest bit of coding I actually did for the project. This was just being able to take the content from the old site, from the markdown files and the media files, which we'll show in a second, and migrate that into SQL, into the SQL database. And this largely just involved making controllers, which would allow me to upload all the media via media service, and then create the content via the content service. I'll talk a little bit about controllers, and the fact that I actually realized what they were very late on into this project, which is also a fun little discovery. And I realized like when I was making this presentation, I should have called this tool a dammit, data migration tool. That's what it has to be. But anyway, alas, we're too late. So quick explanation, this is what a Netlify CMS article actually looks like. It's a bunch of folders. each page is a folder, and within that folder is this kind of index.markdown, and that's got all of the head content and the body content of the actual, the article, and then any image files which are related to that. But that is what the data structure looks like. So we have to start off with uploading all of the media, because it just makes our life much easier if the media is already there, so we can then link to it. So this part of the data migration was to go through all of the content folders, get a set of folder within media, with blog / name of blog, and then find any files which were there in Netlify, and then to just upload them. Fairly standard, but again, that was kind of a really interesting voyage of discovery for me to kind of make this crawler which just went through the file system doing all of those things. Here is a sample of what one of the markdown files looked like. So this would be to do with the content creation itself. So basically the head, and you can see the sort of markdown delineation of the fact that we've got the 3 hyphens, splits between whether or not it's title, author tags, all that kind of stuff, and then the body of the article. So again, I'll show this in more detail later, but made a file crawler that would kind of go through and, okay, this is head, okay, there's going to be the title, the author, and because this is unstructured, it actually meant there was quite a lot of diversity in what could and could not appear. So lots and lots of nullable fields. It was a lot of fun. I've never had any issues with it whatsoever. It was lovely. This is more or less what the body looks like. So it's just markdown. But crucially, and this is kind of one of the failings or more or less problems that we had with the editor experience in Netlify CMS, is that, well, and our implementation thereof, is the fact that if we wanted to have things such as iframes or embedded YouTube or embedded audio, we would use AMP tags, AMP components, my apologies, accelerated mobile pages, Google initiative, and those would just be hard-coded in. So like there wouldn't be, say, an item, it would just literally be the text of, 2 braces, chevron, etc., amp hyphen iframe. That's how we embedded content. And that's how anyone creating articles would have to embed, which was less than great in sort of just a technical perspective and many other perspectives. So instead, I decided to go through all of those AMP components and make appropriate block list editor rows for them. So for example, the AMP image became an image row, the AMP YouTube became YouTube, etc., etc. And then we've got the 2 at the bottom, the AMP carousel and the AMP audio. Those were very much just one-offs, so I just manually did them in terms of the automation of the process, because especially carousels were very, very strange syntax for the AMPs, for the AMP components. But the rest of everything, like the image and the YouTube, that was all quite straightforward to kind of crawl through and work out. Here is just like a screenshot of some just some block list rows, because that's a nice thing to see. So this is kind of how I approached creating the Umbraco pages off these markdown files. So I created this page content object, which itself was built on a header and a body content. The body content then built around this kind of list of iRow interfaces. And then I created a separate interface for each of the different types that could possibly, of those sort of predefined block list rows. And then and we can see top, so the header, those are all the possible sort of things that could appear, which grew every article I saw. And then sort of roughly how, say, audio row would work in terms of the things that we would expect to find and crawl through and then define as a row. And so we could then make this list of, the body content would then be a list of rows, so then we could send each of those rows into a block list editor creator, which I believe is what we're going to see now. So the page content was passed into the content service to provide content nodes. And yeah, this is again quite a large topic to go over, not in this particular video, but this talk. But yeah, it's just how we go about creating block list content through the content service. And it's really, really interesting. I think it's really, really great. And I'd quite like to write a bit more about it. So some weird problems that are along the way included, even the fact that when we're dealing with unstructured data in the markdown files, we have, in this particular instance, it's 12 o'clock. It's 12:334 o'clock, and stuff like that would happen. My personal favorite date was when it was the 1st of January 1. So that was lovely that was, that's just 1/1/1. It's yes, that was nice to see what was that we were talking about Azure Bot Service in the year 1. And then this just made me chuckle, just because when I was doing dev work, I just embedded the page within the page. So that meant that it was endlessly recursive as just an endless stream of the page itself. Just made me chuckle. So this is the automation process, and this is what was automated from the data migration tool versus what I had to do manually. So a good 91% of things I was able to just get done, so I could click and it would work, but still had about 9% of manual bits and pieces to do. They were just fiddly. I've been reassured recently that this is kind of quite standard, and that a full automated migration is not actually that common. So I will take some kind of solace in that. In terms of onboarding, when I talk about the initial problems, one of them, the fact that we don't really have a lot of insight into how the current Nightingale site works, I took the onboarding very, very seriously in terms of creating, so this is the wiki, and this is going to explain the sort of the Umbraco back office terminology, and just explaining that to the other members of staff who haven't used it, or at least haven't used it for a number of years. So created wiki and videos. I held an onboarding session with the CEO, just going through the kind of the full editor experience, and just making sure that she understood it and that it all worked and that we could achieve what she was looking to do. And then held a technical handover with the CTO just to make sure that he was happy with how everything was. And then we submit. So it's really funny to see that everything zipped up. So from the top of the one, we've got this is the backup of the blob storage, got the actual code base itself, got the DAC pack for the database, got documentation that I put together, and then the video. Oh yeah, that's right. You've got the video which I've made for the company for like internal use, but then also for submission, they the university will largely or moreover are very interested in just seeing videos of the thing that you've done and you kind of explaining it. So there is a funny sense that a lot of the dissertation marks go down to like a 10-minute video, like here is what I made and here is me presenting it. Anyway, so that exists, and this is what was submitted. And this is the email which confirms that I definitely have submitted it, but we don't know what the mark is or anything like that. But all I know is I've done everything that I can do, and that is what that is. So quickly, we're just going to go round off these last two chapters. So learning. When I was learning Umbraco, absolutely top 3 sources were the actual documentation of Umbraco itself, the single source of truth, which everyone can improve, and please can everyone improve it. And I just think everyone should take time to try and upgrade try and work on the documentation whenever possible. It's great, and it can always be done with improving. Script, my goodness, Script is wonderful. Typically covers the more advanced content. The Aaron Sadler a blog series, 3-part one on deploying to Azure was wonderful, and I loved it. And yeah, just think they're great. So thank you, Script. And then YouTube, also where we are right now, and the mixed level of content, really, really great. So many good content creators. And as was sort of said in one of the earlier panels today, there should just be more people who are comfortable with making content. It just helps everyone. Huge shout outs to Paul Steele, his in general, but also to for the how to build a website with Umbraco 10. That playlist was a constant fixture for the early kind of weeks of this project. And I also want to say thank you to John D. Jones. His YouTube videos are wonderful, and he gives hilariously opinionated views, but backs them up and says this is why I think it should be done X, Y, and Z. And he wrote a book. And that's pretty great. Umbraco.net Core Mastery. I think it's really interesting. Anyway, so shout outs to John as well. This is a quick example of when I learned about controllers. I learned about controllers because I posted a quick question about something on the Umbraco forum, and Mark Goodson replied with a very, very long, robust response, which then involves, you should probably do that with a controller. It's like, oh, let's look up what a controller is then. So shout outs and thank you to Mark for giving such a wonderfully robust answer. This was to do with the fact that in the docs there was lots of places where it just said here is a code snippet, and it's like, I don't know where to use this code snippet, and Mark was like, use a controller. I was like, oh yeah, controllers exist, let's do that. And that was a day of joy. Source of support, I think the forum is brilliant. The Discord is wonderful for just getting quick responses from people. And Twitter, /X, Mastodon are all lovely places for just throwing concerns into the ether and hoping that people will hear and take pity upon you. Tale of Joe Glombeck, I just wanted to kind of point out this particular story of just the way that I'd read this article from Joe, which is really helpful. I then met Joe at Code Code Cabin. I generally have to look at my own jumper to remember. And because I'd met Joe, that then meant that I felt more comfortable with asking Joe questions. And so the crux of this being, and the moral of a tale of Joe Glombeck, is that I found it easy to ask people for help online after I'd met them in person, which is why I think in-person things are brilliant and wonderful. Anyway, shout outs to Joe. So very, very finally, the reflection. So I wanted to use Umbraco, so I did. That is pretty much the crux of this dissertation. This is pretty much it. I've just said I'm really interested in focusing on this, and I'm so grateful that Nightingale HQ, that Ruth, that Chris were so kind as to give me permission and the trust to just kind of, yeah, you're just going to do that for like 13 weeks, fine. And it was great to have a project. This is a slide that I posted, that I used when I went to Umbraco London, and it was interesting to me how at the time I was kind of saying that a lot of my learnings and problems were around the C#.NET level. And what was lovely to me is that for this project, my problems, and that initially had been like 6 months ago or so, but that now my problems are far more at the ASP.NET Core and the Umbraco level, which is really nice to reflect on where my issues lie. As I was describing this as ascending the pyramid of despair, like it's nice to know where the majority of my problems seem to be lying right now, but whoever knows. There are so many ways of getting everything wrong. You know, for this, I was very unsure, and I'm slightly unsure on the best few ways of using the MVC pattern with Umbraco. There's some really interesting amounts of flexibility that I see from different people's examples. So much of the code is written just so it would work, which is, you know, deadlines. And so much of my project was just set up for me to use, so I could just, you know, I could just deploy to master, I could deploy to main, and I could feel good about that. You know, like I deploy to main so I can feel something. Yeah, the DevOps process, it was untested for multiple users, but it worked for me, and that was fine for this particular project. And but as we eventually look to roll it out, then we will actually develop this to be a touch more robust. And also used very, very, very basic Azure resources, and possibly not in the best ways, but so be it. And I wanted to kind of like round off with the kind of the sentiment that I feel very strongly about, but the best way to learn something is to finish something. I learned so much about this Umbraco project because I finished an Umbraco project, and that's just a wonderful thing. And I'm so grateful for every step that was along the way. So I'd like to finish off by just reminding everyone the tech is hard, to be excellent to one another, and thank you so much for your time and for listening. That's it. Thank you. I can't hear anything that's happening right now. I'm sorry.
Okay. What about now?
Oh, there we go. Hello. Hello.
Hey, there we go.
Hey.
Polima was just giving you loads of praise and telling you how awesome it was, but we don't need to repeat any of that.
Yeah.
It's fine.
No, man. Overrated. Thank you so much. That's very kind.
I was
Yeah.
looking forward to talking to you today primarily because of you were one of the mentions at the first edition of Community Day, and
Yeah.
today you're here as a speaker. So
And
it's
having completed a whole
yeah.
dissertation and whatever else on Umbraco, it's an incredible full circle journey.
Yeah, it's a true community story that
Yeah.
we wanted to highlight today.
That's incredibly kind. Thank you so much. And you two have been a very, very large part of that. And so I'm always
no,
very
that's-
grateful.
No,
So thank
I
you.
think
that's
we
not
are
true.
feeling
I
the
love
efficient.
I love the little community shout outs there for like key people that have helped you out. The Joe Glombeck. What was the exact phrase?
A Tale of Joe
Tale of Joe
Glombeck.
Yeah, there you
Yeah,
go.
yeah, yeah.
That's
The
lovely.
leather-bound novel that we now
Yeah.
need. No, I mean, again, you always feel bad with mentioning a couple of people because then you don't mention the other people. Like the list of like notable mentions would be endless.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Oh, that's good. Lovely story, Richard. Thanks for joining us today. We hope
Thank
and
you so much for having me.
participating in the chat. It's been great. Hope you've enjoyed it. But don't, of course, stick around. We've got 3 fantastic sessions coming up as well, so you won't want to miss those.
Thank you so much for having me. Take care.
Awesome. Cheers, Richard. Okay, give us 15 seconds, and we're going to be back with a really exciting panel on storytelling, I guess, in the Umbraco community.
Absolutely.
Don't go anywhere.